Documentary statement slash documentary overview. Documentary filmmaking in of itself is very unique. The art form is different to ordinary filmmaking because it allows you to tell a real, unaltered story from the perspective of the individual or individuals you are filming. The ideas of creating documentaries came from John Grierson. Grierson is a Scottish filmmaker from the 19th century. He is often noted as being the founder of English and Canadian documentary filmmaking. You can't help but wonder what the creators of documentary filmmaking might think of their art form and how it's being used today. Now, documentaries have always struggled with telling the truth. A director's choice when making a documentary is between telling the truth and telling the story of the person or people that you're doing the documentary with, or you can alter the story to tell the story that you wish to tell. There's a thin line between the truth and the fictional storytelling that can easily hook the audience with the desired story. The only problem with this is that it's untrue and it's treating the audience like morons. If we're going to be discussing documentaries, I think it is appropriate that we discuss one of the first documentaries films to be produced, with that being Nanook of the North, which was a 1922 documentary made by Robert J. Flaherty. The documentary itself follows Nanook, an Inuit tribe member, as he travels and traverses the harsh environments he and his people must endure and survive in. In the documentary, we get clips following Nanook in his daily life, how he travels, how he hunts, and his daily life in general. We see him using makeshift canoes and fishing in small igloos in order to be out of the harsh elements. Only none of this is true. The documentary lies to its audience. It does not portray the accurate depiction of the Inuit people at the time it was filmed. Despite being well received upon its release and celebrated continuously since, Nanook of the North is both fabricated and anachronistic. This is a quote from Cole C. by the title of Catalyst Planet, the first documentary on utter falsehood, Nanook of the North, written by Catalyst Planet. The methods of survival used in the documentary were already outdated by less than 100 years and were rarely used by the Inuit people. Even the main character we follow is a lie. His name's not Nanook, it's actually Alakari Alak. The name Nanook was simply made to be more marketable and seen as better for general audiences. Now, I do understand that at the time, this is when documentaries were literally just beginning, but a standard should have been set to not lie to the audience when making informative documentaries, or it should have been prefaced that this was a product showcasing how the Inuit people used to survive, not how they currently survive. Now, in general, there are three different forms of documentary filmmaking. These forms are used universally by many different filmmakers and often overlap and end up being used in conjunction with one another. The different forms I'll discuss are the following: expository, observational, and poetic. The following forms are my personal favourites and are some of the most used forms of documentary filmmaking, and two of them are universally known through Murder and National Geographic documentaries. We may know expository documentaries would come from murder documentaries. Think of the Netflix murder documentaries that have become popular over the years, especially over COVID. These documentaries would be classed as expository because of the nature of them. Their entire purpose is to explain to the audience a set of points in chronological order, whilst leaving some details out to later use to rehook the audience members. This type of filmmaking is shown in documentaries like the Night Stalker documentary, The Killing Fields, as well as the Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy confession tapes. The next form of documentary filmmaking is observational filmmaking. This form is often used in documentaries where we follow the average person's day-to-day life. Think of TLC and their shows like My Strange Addiction. These documentaries have the cameraman act like a fly on the wall, merely observing the scene being showcased to them and taking it all in. The purpose of these sorts of documentaries is to allow the audience to see what is transpiring in real time, allowing them to feel more connected and allowing them to come to their own conclusions on the situations that are being presented to them. They are allowed to come to the conclusion of what is happening without constantly being spoon-fed to them, as it often is done in most expositional documentaries. Now there's poetic documentaries. Poetic documentaries are very different in nature and are more so made so that the viewers can come to their own conclusions on certain topics. Poetic documentaries usually have no set standard, only that they do not include direct dialogue from the creator or any interference. The purpose of this style is to allow the audience to come to their own conclusions. Now, I have watched two documentaries before this assignment, one being The Thin Blue Line by Errol Morris. The Thin Blue Line follows the arrest, trial, and conviction of teenager David Harris. The documentary goes into the trial and leads you to wonder if the police truly captured the right person. This documentary was released in 1988. The second documentary I viewed was the trial of Gabriel Fernandez. This documentary follows the harrowing tale of a young boy who was murdered by his mother and stepfather, detailing the horror the boy went through while highlighting how all this could have been avoided. The documentary was directed by Brian Knappenberger and was released in 2020. The Thin Blue Line is an expository form of documentary filmmaking, focusing on the facts as well as the obvious missteps and corruption that was being showcased by the Dallas police. To sum it up, David was charged with the murder of a police officer who had pulled David over for a broken headlight. What's interesting though is that Randall Dale Adams was a hitchhiker who accepted a ride from David and who was also present at the scene. The question the documentary poses and supports with police testimonies and new findings suggests that David was not the shooter. The documentary is expository in nature, having interviews with family members, police officers, and on scene, etc. Each of them give their own opinion on the subject based on facts. The documentary then has voiceover scenes where the narrator takes the audience to see the evidence provided, along with the video footage and court testimonies and transcripts from David's trial. Ultimately, the point of the documentary is to show how easily corruption and manipulation can affect the court sentencing as well as a man's life. If I were to give my opinion on it, I feel that the topic chosen is slightly niche compared to the other documentaries that could have been made at the time, but I thoroughly enjoyed watching it, as it was a new piece of information on a crime and conviction that needed to have fresh light shown upon it. However, I did not like how some of its scenes with the interviewees drag on the documentary. At points we see detectives discussing the case. In one instance we see a detective talk about how he felt he had evidence to suggest that David did in fact not commit the murder. He goes on and talk about how he felt like it would have cracked the case open, and as an audience member you feel like you're about to get a payoff, but then it's revealed that this lead led to nowhere. It was just a tool built on false suspense, and now in general the documentary isn't bad, and it does a fantastic job by showcasing the case and trial that occurred. I just personally do not like the false suspense that was built up. Meanwhile, we have the trial of Gabriel Fernandez. This is an expository documentary too. The documentary follows court testimonies, officer footage, and retellings of the events that unfolded for Gabriel. The documentary follows the torture that the poor child had to endure by the hands of his mother and stepfather. This is conveyed to the audience by showing the items that was used and the container used on Gabriel as well, while giving statements taken from family members and from on-scene officers, including Gabriel's uncles and siblings. It also gives insight to the mental state of both family members who took part in this unforgivably slow and painful moment of this young boy's life. Now, the documentary itself was a fascinating watch and was a very enlightening experience. I feel that this documentary clearly showcased the case that had occurred as well as the inhuman crime that had been committed. It told us, the audience, the facts and kept them as much as possible. There were obvious context given to certain things when it was needed, and was pushed the connection that was made between the audience member and those who were affected by the crime. Now, if I did have one complaint, I would say that the length of the documentary could have been shorter. I think that certain topics could have been easily cut or skipped, but I understand why the filmmakers wanted to include them to give more context. To conclude, I believe that all these documentary forms and styles have merit and are all fantastic additions to the world of documentary filmmaking. Documentaries can be an opening for people to learn more about the topics they may feel uneducated in, or it may be an opening for them to become more knowledgeable in certain fields. They can also be educational in history or important events that may have happened. I personally can say that if it weren't for documentaries, I wouldn't have found my love for marine life or even for literature development. It was a key part for my studies during my Leaving Cert, and without it, I wouldn't have fallen in love with writing like I have now. Documentaries themselves have multiple modes, spanning from expository, observatory, and poetic. These modes can influence the style of the documentary and how it is made, and how the audience may perceive it. When telling a story, you need to be honest as a filmmaker. So if it is fictitious, it needs to be told to the audience, unlike with Nanook of the North, which was a fictitious documentary. Finally, when it comes to two similar yet different documentaries, we can look at the trial of Gabriel Fernandez and the Thin Blue Line. These are two documentaries that tell different stories in similar ways, yet one does a better job avoiding false drama and suspense, instead looking to just tell the truth and be honest with its audience. The references can be found in the director's statement and script for this video.